as a result. I apologize to anybody who got terribly confused by my posting of the agenda as July 8th. Somehow my brain doubled 4 as the way to get to a second Thursday, and I was obviously wrong, because here we are on the 11th, and it's a good day. We're mostly healthy, and some of us are happy and smiling. Okay, I want to point out that if you are a person who relies on our agenda page, that page is updated on a fairly regular basis monthly. But during the couple of weeks leading up to our actual meeting, it will change more than once. There's an initial posting of the agenda that happens sometime between 2 weeks and a week out. And then as more and more contributions come into the agenda session, the agenda gets updated with more things to talk about. And you should be able to look at that agenda at NatickFOSS.org agenda. And I'm going to bring that up if you can be patient with me while that happens. Natick, where are we? There. The current is always available from this link at the base of the heading, and you'll note what date here, the 11th, somewhat earlier this morning. That was updated because this was updated. It's not the same that you'll see on the other screen, which is designed to be a little easier to read in a meeting setting because of the smaller size of this image. So back to that agenda that's on the screen now, I hope. And we're ready for some FOSS news. The initial item is about a conference being held by the United Nations. And while it's not specific to any particular kind of software, it describes what they do when they have open source program offices who need to discuss what's going on back and forth within the scope of the United Nations. I don't know an awful lot about this, but I have a feeling that it's a very good sign for the power of open source internationally. They may not have the effect in the US, but I think the United Nations worldwide presents a good picture for others to emulate. And here they're suggesting open source is worth having a program of conference about their program. Anybody know more about it than I did? Okay. A second piece of that sort, there's a thing called the Sovereign Tech Fund, which is, I believe, sponsored by a government agency, possibly out of Germany, but certainly within the scope of the European Union. What it does is to provide funding for technologies that are developing open source in the public interest, meaning beyond just open source for individuals, open source designed for the greater benefit of the public. And what I found interesting in this area was that the GNOME has a regular posting that they do about what's going on in their software system. And they almost always have a heading that talks about the Sovereign Tech Fund, supporting different features within the GNOME system. So here's another expansion of the method for supporting open source software, not just having to do everything by volunteers. I think that's a very neat piece of information to follow up on. So if anybody wants to track more about that, so we can discuss it in the future, I'd be glad to hear about it. Anybody have comments? I see there's something. Oh, Jerry's gone because his system locked up. That's too bad. Okay, back to my agenda, our agenda, I must say. There was no notable FOSS history about which I was aware. Anybody know of some that we all ought to discuss and be proud of? If not, we'll move on to hot software and our current version of Photox with its new spelling, version 24.5. And Dick, I think you have something to say.
I can do that one quickly. Excuse me. I thought I could. Photox updates when there's good things to update to, not on a regular schedule. But the 24 indicates it's this year. And the version 0.50 has a bunch of nice new features. And the easiest way to find out more is to click on that link and read about what's new in 24.50. I can tell you we love Photox. Some of you may not know it changes double X at the end to a CX at the end. And you can still find good information of older dates, knowing to look for Photox with a double X instead. So I don't want to demo it today. It's running very smoothly for us. And I'll just say briefly for newcomers that Photox used to say it's Botox for photos. And with the double X, that made better sense. But it allows you to do almost every kind of photo processing, laying text onto the photo, combinations like that. And it's also a great manager of vast numbers of photos. It does all the photo stuff in one, unless you don't want it to do some of it. For instance, it can run slideshows, but sometimes I prefer to run Variety. That's the slideshow I'm running. That's my normal wallpaper. Things vary. It's just changed again. And so Photox is marvelous. If you haven't tried it, click read all about it. Give it a try. The price is right. That's it.
Thank you, Dick.
If there are any questions, let me know.
Going further than just the excellent program itself, we have two items about LibreOffice. It is a great tool for any kind of person who wants to do office work, typing, presentations, calculations, all the same kind of things that have been around in every Office suite ever manufactured. But LibreOffice has become the number one popular Office suite. And part of it is that they have a lot of people doing a great deal of work to maintain an annual set of work guides that tell you how to do anything you might want to work with. There's an Impress guide for doing the presentations, a guide to their spreadsheet program called Calc, the Writer for doing all the typing and document preparation that you might be interested at going on. It's quite a thorough set of very good documentation. And if you want to get to know it better, even if you use it currently, this is one of the great sets of documentation that are out there. Another interesting piece about LibreOffice is that it can be used as a library, which is what is the technical description of embedding a program inside another one. A library called LibreOffice Kit in this case allows someone to add word processing without having to write their own word processor, or to do calculations without having to do their own spreadsheet. LibreOffice Kit, I described here, is a very interesting piece, probably not for anybody who isn't a developer of software, but it's nice to know that the LibreOffice has grown to the point where it was worth the time of the developers of the program to make it available to other uses. And of course, that's the whole point of open source software, is to try to make the software as useful and complete and powerful as it's possible to do without having to charge people an arm and a leg, and without having to lock things down so nobody can figure out how you did something. And that's proprietary stuff, which we here at Linux, at the Linux user group level, NatickFOSS.org being one of those groups that meets to talk about this stuff, we're very, very happy to support and use open source or free software. Free because you can use it as you see fit. I know many people in our group do use LibreOffice on a daily basis, or at least routinely, and we recommend it.
I did about 15 minutes ago.
There you go. Jerry is a very good example, speaking up when needed. Thank you.
And I have been using LibreOffice to prepare presentations for several groups for quite a while. I noticed something interesting about what they said in this article, that this kit is designed to replace the older Uno framework. And Uno was very Java dependent.
And that was a heavy, heavy system as a result, meaning that it had so many pieces of the puzzle that were required that the size of any program that utilized the Uno system had a big impact on the speed and reliability of a computer using it. And by taking care of that overload, the application can be embedded much more easily. I'm not a programmer, but this is how I understand it.
Yes, and this has implications for if there is, in fact, a trend toward going over to ARM systems. Apple has done it, and it looks like Microsoft is beginning to do it.
And as the ARM processor begins to compete on a lot of levels with what we know as the x86 series. Or what's the other one? The Arch. Is that correct?
There is one that is Arch. But anyway, there's AMD, there's Intel, there's all ARC.
It's the AMD, which most 64-bit systems are described when you install Linux. They're described not as an x86 anymore, the way they once were. Okay. The next is, again, something that is related more to people who are programmers and people who develop their own little scripts within their terminal shell. This is not for the people who just want to write a letter to grandma. But if you are a person who operates at the command line level, this person describes a very interesting process allowing you to avoid the script conflict that would happen over time as new scripts are introduced as part of the system script set. This person has discovered and made this article to tell us about it, that the very first character of every script that he writes begins with a comma, because even if the word find is a system level script, he can write his own version and place it into his computer and name it comma find instead, so that he gets to do his script version instead of the standard system version. And the interesting thing was that he finds that the comma is the only safe character that you could possibly use, as there are all these others. They're all considered unsafe as a script name element. So if you do scripts, you might want to read this and find out how he recommends doing it. Leading from that, we go right on into finding out why Jack Whalen, who writes for PC Mag, I think is the name of the...
Algot, you may have skipped something about identifying your desktop environment. That leads into
I
this.
did. I'm sorry. Oh, thank you.
This.
I did not mean to do that. It was already visited on my screen, so I thought I'd talk about it. This place is a source of code. It's called the GitHub. GitHub is a programmer's area, a programmer's site, where different people store and share the programs that they write. Open source, almost always, free to download, free to install. But this person has written a program that will describe your system to you. Let me open this particular window, which is a shot of an Arch Linux system, if I have that right. No, it's, excuse me, the Fedora Asahi Remix. There's the Arch 64 that I was talking about right up here on the description line. The operating system has been installed and is running on a MacBook Pro with a 16-inch diagonal screen, an M1 Pro processor. And all this information is otherwise less convenient to find. But if you install this person's program, which I have done and used successfully, called Fast Fetch, you will learn a great deal more about your system than you would find by going to the info screen of your GUI system. My info screen does not show nearly as much when I go to what I use is, of course, a version of the Plasma desktop. A lot of people use the GNOME display environment. But either way, those info programs, the GUI versions, click the mouse to display it, don't come near showing as much information as this. Now, not everybody needs to know this, but it's really great when you can get to it to be able to describe your system or a problem that you're having with some particular piece, and a person helping you will benefit from knowing that not only are you running a CPU that's an M1 Pro at 3.23 gigahertz, but that you have a GUI, a GPU, which is the graphics processor as opposed to the central processor, and it's an integrated GPU in this case. So on and on with that. It's a troubleshooting tool when you have an expert helping you. So I recommend this as a way to learn a lot about your system. Okay. Backing up a couple of steps. Thank you, Bob, for keeping me honest not to forget that. Okay. Why do people resist Linux desktops? Jack Whalen and his perspective has not quite Microsoft, but not quite Linux perspective. He has proposed that one reason that people don't use Linux is that there are too many desktops, too many ways to use Linux, too many sources of what we call a desktop environment, not just the Linux kernel, which is underlying all of them. And I don't know whether Bob wants to add to this.
Well, yes, as a matter of fact, I do. I want to highlight part of the article. So may I share the screen?
Yes, I'll stop my sharing.
And what I am going to do is the entire screen. And this should be sharing my entire screen so that I can now pull this up and full screen. Are people seeing the article?
Yes.
Okay. I basically, to give you the idea of the numbers, and the report was that with all the things that have been going on, the announcement of changes in Windows 11, maybe even Windows 12, changes in Macs, adoption of ARM and whatnot, you'd think that more and more people would be thinking, we've had it with all this having to spend more money on new stuff. And now we want to do something we can do with what we have, and we want something that's inexpensive or free. And yet, Linux has only hit the 3% threshold in the desktop market. Now, 3% for any other operating system would not be something to celebrate, but for Linux, it's something to say huzzah over. So huzzah. But here's the thing. Over the past few years, Jack Whalen has developed a theory as to why Linux has yet to take over the desktop. The problem is, open source community, cover your eyes, the lack of a representative version of Linux that is friendly for beginners. Sure, people will say Ubuntu, Linux Mint, Elementary OS, Zorin OS, Ubuntu Budgie, but they're saying different things. Many of us even say Fedora. They're saying different things. They're different operating systems, even different file systems, and you have to set it up yourself very often. Hardly any Linux comes with just here's the Linux installer, toss it into your system, sit back for half an hour, and it's done. You can do something very standard with almost all of them, but it's a little more of a learning curve. But anyway, so what Jack says is there's a big caveat. Which distribution should it be? Should it be somebody's favorite Fedora? Should it be Linux Mint or Debian Edition? Should it be Ubuntu? Or should it be something else, maybe Zorin? So that's where it gets tricky. So to get around this, he's suggesting the elements that should be involved in an official distro. Standard users added as a pseudo group, Snap and Flatpak support, and I should add AppImage. AppImage is supported by everybody. And user choice of web browser, new release software available. And I would also add, maybe for advanced people, different kernels. And also advanced hardware kernels. That's been an issue for some of my hardware with things like MX Linux. So then who would control it? Who would maintain it? Would it be a professional group that would be paid? Would it be a free Libre group, which we all like? And all that. So with an official distribution, everyone would know where to point new users. And that's basically his thesis. So I am going to get back to my version of the agenda and then back to the meeting and return you to your stop share.
Okay. This, I agree, Bob, is one of the thorniest issues of the desktop computer. If you buy a Macintosh, you get Mac OS. It's there. It's installed. You have no choice unless you really want to do a lot to your system. The same is true for a standard PC. When you buy from Staples, you buy from Best Buy, you buy from an online vendor. 99% of those computers are automatically going to be Windows. Sometimes they'll be Windows 11, sometimes they'll be Windows 10. Whatever happens to the flavor that was installed with that batch of computers at the beginning is what you get. And then you can learn how to upgrade them and all that business, which for most people is tricky anyway. Just to update your system, it used to be that you had choices about it, but my understanding is that Microsoft has begun to do every update that it can possibly do while you're asleep. If you've left your computer on, your computer will update, and you might come in the next day and find, yes, your computer's been updated. Please wait while I do something very important that you can't do anything else while I'm doing that important thing, because I am Microsoft. And Windows is what makes your computer work after all. So just sit there and wait while I get finished. I don't know if it's that nasty anymore, but it was for a while. I do remember at least twice that I was at a conference where my computer was running all day long. Came to the end of the conference. I had about 25 minutes that I had to finish up, close my stuff down, clear up my site, and get out of the building. And my computer was telling me, do not shut down your computer. I'm doing an upgrade. If you shut down your computer, I won't be able to do my upgrade and your computer will be all messed up. Now, I didn't say those exact words, but that's one of the reasons that I have completely abandoned Windows as an operating system because that experience was traumatic to me. They were going to lock the door with me carrying a computer that was open and active out the door, along with all the stuff that I had to carry on a cart. Was not an enjoyable moment. Now they've gotten better about it, but it still bugs me.
Yeah.
So Linux doesn't do it that way.
True. And Microsoft says you have to be at a certain level of updates. You cannot decline one. You can't have a different kernel, things like that. And what the updating process is now is much faster and easier, but they're taking away the troubleshooters and replacing them with AI. So now you have to buy a whole new computer that has a neural processing unit. That's $1,000 out of your pocket just for the ARM version. And it goes up if you do AMD or Intel. So they're at it again.
I doubt that things will change for the foreseeable future unless people are so disturbed by the process that the business world begins requiring Linux as the operating system rather than Windows. And I don't see that happening in a hot minute. Because business is what made me aware of how things worked. I used a Macintosh lab when I was teaching, and one of the finance people on the town's committee that helped to finance our purchases came in with the principal and walked around and said, "Oh, this is very nice, but the next time you upgrade, you're going PC." And I said, "What? Why am I going PC?" Because that's faster, better, easier. And he said, "Just look at this. I have to do Control P, enter here to print. And all I have to do is Control P on a PC, on a Windows computer. That's much better and much faster." I thought, what? For 2 keys versus 3, you want to replace a system that is functional and working fine with something that is a business machine for teaching? I couldn't understand that logic, and I still find myself puzzled why a system that is somebody else's makes more sense. Anyway. All right. Anybody else have comments? I will reshare and we'll go again.
Sorry, I'm late.
Yeah, I just ran
Firefox.
FastFetch. I downloaded and ran it. It got some interesting results. But I can't share a
That's
window like that. So
Jerry?
yes.
No. Yeah. Okay, I'm off to here. Okay. We're moving along. It's not too long here in the hot software. Fortunately, we have a lot to talk about, and we'll get there as we get there. All right, Linux Mint 22 as one of the approved versions. Jack Whalen again, apparently, in the ZDNet PC Mag kind of writing. Dick Miller, you brought this to our attention.
I can explain more. I want to mention that the prior topic by Jack Wallen, he thinks that if we get one standardized, fairly simple but fairly robust Linux, everyone could start on that one and then move on to other ones, and it'd be a lot easier to get aboard without the extra confusion of 57 varieties. So, which is an understatement. All of these comments following are ones I put together based on his suggestion. There are ways of measuring it against different issues. The exception is the last one in the list, not mine, but all the others under it are. So first I'll mention Linux Mint 22 beta is out and running quite smoothly. I decided not to run it for the demo because I know there's something I won't be that used to doing with it and I get stuck on it. My brain is half fried in this weather. So I'm working on Linux Mint 21.3, the newest one in release form, at least for the cinnamon flavor of Linux Mint. Linux Mint is built on various levels of other packages, and the cinnamon version is built on Ubuntu, which in turn is built on a couple of layers lower than that. Not all Linux Mint is done that way, but Cinnamon is. That's the one I've been running and liking. And the 22 beta looks just even smoother with a few more good features. It could be one of those candidates for the standard one. Not the only one, but I'm finding it easier to teach other people, and I like it myself. So you can just click on that later and read what the new features are. I expect in less than a month and perhaps a week, it won't be a beta. And one of the reasons I'm not running on it today is last night I did an update on it and I ran out of time to figure out what the changes were I picked up last night. Let's not do that on a demo. But tonight I'll play with it a little more. It's a beta. It's out there for you to use as a beta and comment back. And the catch is the beta is updating even faster than final versions update. A lot of changes going on right now, mostly down under what a casual user would see, but perfecting the release a little before they say release instead of beta. That's basically what I want to say about it. You can click on it to try it. It's quite popular out there, and we moved from not Ubuntu. Many years ago, we moved from Ubuntu to Ubuntu Unity, which obviously is based on Ubuntu also. I like this even more for sharing with lots of other people. Works easy, good documentation, good commenting, good articles about it. If you're looking for one to try, give it a try. My next article, any questions on Linux Mint? I will proceed. The next one is SolarWinds was a hack that was a disaster in many ways. And Microsoft decided, if we tell you about it, you'll only get nervous. Why should we mention it out loud? And a lot later, they started comparing notes on what to do and how to fix it. This is the opposite of open source software, and Linux should hear it pretty quickly. So if you want one more reason why you want to help people to move companies, move schools, etc.,
Move the feds.
to Linux, just take a look at that article, the SolarWinds hack, and how much damage it did, and how much confusion there was and how to fix it, and how much non-discussion there was of it for a long time when it needed discussion. Interesting how these things work. So to me, it's another argument for why don't more people use desktop Linux? And you can look later when you want. uh, flaws in open source software exposed almost every Apple device to hacking. An interesting article. Well, they're not flaws in open source software that backfired on Linux on an Apple. So that makes a good read too. How to get into Linux instead of tack it in places. I think it's part of that same discussion. And we sort of complained about Microsoft, Windows. We sort of complained about Apple in view of that first article that Bob Primack brought to our attention. So those are ones I added on. I've added on a few more since then. They may show up in a day or two on the list, and they may not. Thank you. Any comments?
Yeah, one of the things I think I didn't read the article. So one of the things I think that also needs to be mentioned is that every Android runs on Linux. And Linux is very, very big in the server space.
I believe it was mentioned that Android is basically Android and Chrome OS are based on Gen 2, and they made their own fork. And it isn't really an easy thing to develop openly for beginners. It's not the easiest distro. And I think that's what Jack was saying about it.
Yeah.
All right.
No, I mean, you need a turn-on distro. Your computer, you install or buy the computer with it installed, and it just runs. And you decide if you want it updated or not. You have the ability to be able to back out a bad update. But the Linux community is just, we have an awful lot of choices. And Dick Miller likes his Ubuntu and Unity type desktops. I like GNOME, and Dennis likes being in Star Trek. And Algot likes KDE. Has anybody heard of CDE?
Nope.
CDE is a forerunner of all these desktops. It's a common desktop environment. That's where it comes from. And it comes from Unix back in even before Linux was invented.
It started with the Motif toolkit that
Yes.
wasn't open source, so that's what caused KDE to be created as a competitor.
It's a magnificent mishmash of great tools, some of which we continue to use, some of which we couldn't use because they were proprietary, locked down, not open.
Yep.
And we all advocate for working with those tools that can be, excuse me, used by experts in order to make tools that can be used by ordinary users so that people like me can enjoy our computers without having to be held hostage by anybody. It's a long process to become comfortable with any computer. And Linux at least does not have a lockdown system that forces you into doing things one way if you want to do it another way. Which brings us to a Linux experiment video that describes the process of packaging in a very interesting way. When you package software, that means you're putting it together to be used by people that want it. There are two common packaging systems that are currently called the DEB and the RPM. There are others, but those packaging systems are the two common ones in my experience. But there are now efforts to make other packaging systems flat pack and snap. How safe are those systems? Are you secure just because those systems are under somebody's control? And this video, which is only about 20 minutes long and interesting within that time frame, gives you a good perspective on the different packaging systems and why it becomes necessary to be cautious, because security, avoiding these hacks, avoiding the weaknesses of human frailty. We hope that everything is always 100% secure, and sometimes it isn't. Sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot. This particular video is a good explanation of how the packaging systems all do their job and how the job of packaging gets done. So I strongly urge that those with an interest take a look at it. And with that social engineering concept in our minds, we can move on to the hot hardware. This is not so much a hot, agreeable hardware, but it turns out that there is a subway access card that you can get up in Montreal's metro system, the subways, that is a throwaway card, sort of like a Charlie card, which we have here in Boston, but this one has a chip in it that is so thin that it fits inside a piece of paper, double layer, I suppose, to get it inside. And using that, you can put a certain amount of money onto this card and off you go, riding the subway for as long as you want. I thought that was very interesting as a
Cardstock
topic.
is almost always double layer.
Pardon?
Cardstock is almost always double layer.
That's a good point.
Anyway,
That's a good point. So during the manufacturing and processing of the paper, I suppose they embed the NFC near what is NF? Near field. That's it. Near field communication chip. I have credit cards that have NFC chips in them, so all I have to do is place them on the card reader instead of sticking them in the card reader. That's the new version of most credit cards that have come out in the last 4 or 5 years. But this one, disposable. Of course, what do you do with the chip inside? It's really not recyclable, I suppose. Anyway, hot in its own way. Off we go to the hot internet. There is an interesting World Wide Web Consortium draft on web ethics. Apparently there has not been one, but there now is. We know the web has been around since Tim Berners-Lee introduced the software for the WWW, World Wide Web, that is common in almost all web addresses. But over time, the people who use the web have done so many different fancy things that the original web principles that were, let's distribute information, let's make it accessible in a way that others can find it, let's link from article to article, let's link websites so that they are a giant network of information that everybody can access and will be better for it scientifically, will be better for it as a community, will be better for it in all sorts of ways. But apparently the consortium did not have this list of web principles written down anywhere that we may want to try to get back to, instead of letting corporate and state actors and others with less than ethical goals allow them to control what the web can offer us. Silos, not openness. We want to avoid that as far as I'm concerned. Comments? Wonderful. Another thing is OpenRSS, really simple syndication of a website's content so that you don't have to go and check the website if it's the same as it was last week. You want to wait until the website changes and then get notified when it changes. And that was the whole point of really simple syndication with RSS reader software. What if a site doesn't offer a feed of its own? Well, this OpenRSS.org says they'll offer a feed that they build themselves based on what the changes are at any given site you might want to visit. RSS is an older piece of technology, and for some people it has gone out of favor. Google once had a feed reader that everybody used, and then they canceled it, probably because they couldn't figure out a way to make money from it. Because all it did was to feed out direct links with no advertising connected to them. Of course, that was the whole point of RSS, really simple, not advertising based. So you can still do it. Some of us have web pages that we have RSS feeds connected to. But if you can't find a feed on a site, this group says they'll make one for you. And another thing about simplicity, RSS was a simple thing. This is a heck of a lot different from the normal CNN news site, CNN.com. This is light.cnn.com. And as you can see, it's just a page of links. It's the same articles that are found on CNN.com, but for whatever reason, they have decided that there are people out here in the world who do not have high-speed internet connections, who want to know about the world and want to get the latest news. So they have developed this version of their website as opposed to the CNN.com website. Now, I'm not saying you should be interested in CNN as a news site, just that I heard about this and I thought, How many news sites are doing this? Anybody know? Is there
I put in
MSNBC?
I put in
Yes,
chat
go ahead.
I put in chat a link, and it was in 2023, and it's called a list of text-only minimalist news sites. And just looking down it, there's the New York Times, Christian.
Go.
Okay, restarting the list. They classify it by U.S., Canadian, UK, and others. And it does have CNN. It has New York Times Wire, Christian Science Monitor, NPR, and PBS. In Canada, CBC Low Bandwidth, Radio Canada Mini. UK, Daily Mail, Guardian, Reuters, which is part of Reuters, and Post Online. And there's technology news, ReadSpike, Hacker News without the A, and Hacker Web with the A, Lobsters, Cyber Report, Alter Slash, 1MB Club, and there are other lightweight interfaces, and it goes on and on and on. Wikipedia-based, general news aggregators, weather, and others. So it's a pretty neat little listing.
I will definitely add that to this agenda so others can find it easily. Thank you, Bob.
Okay, that's in chat.
Yep. I make sure I will save the chat later in the afternoon. Okay. Open Web. ActivityPub is a thing similar to the HTTP web concept that allows sharing of social media posts. And it is the basis of Mastodon, which is the kind of the flagship version of a piece of software that is social media software based on this ActivityPub protocol. There's a blogging tool called Ghost, and they have an interesting article here on how the open web is being benefited by the ActivityPub protocol. So if you want to read more about their take on it, I would recommend a look at this link. I don't necessarily know anything about Ghost, but given that it's a way to open the web, ActivityPub is something that I think we need to be aware of and need to consider as a future tool for a lot of different kinds of software. Okay, Jerry has information about things to do after installing Linux. This is an article in How to Geek that they recommend everybody do when you are finished with the base install. Want to comment on that, Jerry?
Yes. You know, it's pretty nice to do, but a lot of people don't know really how to first update the system. Once they install the system, they really need to update it because their software is going to be ancient when they do that. I don't necessarily agree 100% with this guy, but I think a couple of the main things you need to look at is the media codecs. Like on Fedora, you install RPM Fusion, has all the media codecs, and Ubuntu has a similar thing. I forgot. Install necessary drivers, probably not necessary. Most new distributions, you don't need to install. And trying to install some of these proprietary drivers can really cause some problems. Remove unnecessary software, that's Ed's expertise. Ed really does a good job with that. But I want to go down here. I never set up Wine. but I have used it in the past when I need to. But configure, can create backups. I think whether you're a Linux user, a Windows user, or a Mac user, having backups is really valuable, except when your backup fails. I had a problem where I used to do it in tar file and it got too big. It needed to be 64-bit and it was 32-bit. So it got too big. But that's what you do. And again, beautify your Linux environment. Configure your desktop environment. Add extensions and stuff like that. Next week in a BLU meeting, we're going to be talking about that, where Abhishek, who is the founder of NatickFOSS.com, is going to be talking about that. But all these things I think are pretty good. I don't think all of these are really easy for some of the not too techie users. I don't enable Flatpaks. I disable snaps. But like setting up Wine, I had some software that really had to run under Windows, and I had set up Wine to run it. And also in NatickFOSS, this is some of the stuff I used to do with people. So I think none of you, except for Dick, I think has been to one, and Bill has been to one of the NatickFOSS.
I used to participate.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, very good points. I would say something about backups. Verify and test your backups. That way what happened to Jerry might not happen to you. Or if it does happen, you can redo it before disaster strikes. The other thing I want to say is some Linux distros, especially Debian, which is more conservative, do not like non-free software. So both the drivers and the media codecs you must import. And that is a post-install thing you have to do.
Yep. Yeah, the Ubuntu and Fedora and SUSE used to allow a certain amount of non-free stuff, but they all had extra distros that you could put in your database.
Yeah, in your software sources. Yes, and regarding Flatpak, especially in various Debian-based editions, you just run into so much dependency hell if you don't ever use Flatpak. It just simply contains what you need, but you have to consider what one of these articles says about security. AppImage is everything altogether, but it tends to be a gigantic package. You're duplicating resources, and you'll get bloat.
Yeah, this is, I think, the problem with all three of these: Snap, AppImage, and Flatpak. Of course, Flatpak and Snap are virtualizations, but they create a barrier to certain things, and Jill can talk about that. So I don't like those at all. So we can move on.
Okay, thank you. One might note that things to do after installing Linux, if you are a non-geek user typically are get to know the system that you installed. That wasn't really mentioned there because the assumption in that article, I think, is if you are a geek, a person who has done installs of Linux a dozen times or maybe 100 times on other people's computers, you know what you want. But if you are installing Linux for the first time, follow somebody's recommendation for which of the current desktops to try, as Dick recommended Mint 22 as it's about to come out. Get to know it. Don't mess around doing all sorts of fancy things until you have understood how it is working for you in its base install. The only exception to that is if you do serious work with it, do figure out how to make the backups. That's the one I think Jerry pointed out is a very critical thing. And understand how to do how to do an update. We've talked about updates many, many times as we did earlier today. Know what you're installing as soon as you possibly can. Do updates so that you have the best, most hackable, the most unhackable system available from your sources. Two-factor authentication. I use it because every once in a while I have to do some kind of transaction where they want to prove that I'm me, and they call my cell phone and send me a code, and I have to put the code into a website field. I'm the person holding my phone, so I'm me, right? Well, Apple has something called Authy, A-U-T-H-Y. It's an iOS, their authentication for the mobile phone systems. The iOS, I think, is what they call that. They had an issue where all the phone numbers in that Authy system were exposed. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to benefit somebody, but it makes you wonder, what if somebody cuts off your thumb and uses it when you've got that thumb reader on your laptop, so the laptop knows it's you? You always see that in the movies. I don't know. And your credit card sounds like a pretty good deal, that it is very coded and they don't even have the raised letters on them anymore. The particular post is developing a picture here to show, if you can see it, that is a card skimmer. There's a little piece of hardware that someone stuck into one of those gas pump readers. And theoretically, when they came back to pull this skimmer out, it contained information from the last 24 hours of cards that were put into the reader. I don't know how successful this one was, but the person in the article, in the post here, talks about the, shimmer, not skimmer. It was
Well, it's both.
accidentally pulled back out with the card when the person removed the card.
I mean, you're not wrong. It's a shim that also is a skim.
Mm-hmm. Interesting technology. It's certainly hot in a negative sort of way where you can get burned when you buy gas. And I don't know how bad that particular shim data skimmer. It took about 20 seconds to install it and only 150 microns thick. So you wouldn't know it was there if you didn't have it fall out. Interesting stuff. And then we talk about what being scammed is all about. A skimmer, a shim, is one method by which you can be defrauded, but more of the social engineering kinds of scams are out there. If you follow this link, you're going to get a good article about what social engineering is. Oh, my daughter, she needs money. Send me $1. I'll add it to all the other dollars people send me and she'll be okay. Do you know that person? Do you send them $1? See things every once in a while in my email asking me, please send me money. The terms are sometimes phishing, which typically uses email and web links. I didn't know about these other terms. Smishing, same stuff, but uses SMS text messages. Those are the ones that you get on your phone when somebody sends you a message instead of talking to you. And then vishing uses a phone call or voicemail. Don't trust everybody. I don't know. Get to know them before you send them anything important. Did I hear a hand raised there? No, it must have been some other noise on my computer.
Ed had a hand raise.
Oh, he did. Sorry, Ed, go ahead.
Okay, regarding vishing with the V, I recently learned that if you have Comcast for your landline telephone service, as I do, they now provide options to block scam calls. It'll either have a low, medium, or a high level or high potential of being a scam call. So what I decided to do is for all three options, you can either let the call come in, go to voicemail automatically, or completely block the call. So for the three options, I chose to send all three types to voicemail. So any calls, if my phone now rings, it's from a verified phone number, and 99% of the numbers I don't even recognize, so I do not even answer the call. And all the others that came in that go directly to voicemail, I have received 0 voicemail messages.
That's true for our experience as well. We don't answer our phone if it says Milton, Massachusetts, because we don't know anybody personally from Milton, Massachusetts. It's probably somebody using a telephone that was registered to the area code where Milton might be, but is not necessarily even a real phone number.
Well, the ones that have been coming in lately with the V indicator, meaning it's verified, was from area code 302, which is Delaware. And I do not know anybody in Delaware.
That's the problem. And like you, all the voicemails are End of message. So I delete them one after another after another. But it's a system that needs to be massaged, because every once in a while somebody does call from a number that I don't quite recognize. And if I know I have an appointment coming up that needs to be rechecked for some reason, I do answer those. And if it is a person, they'll speak right up. If it's somebody who is doing a robocall, it waits a couple of seconds and does a little clicky noise, and somebody comes on and says, "Hello, I represent Joe." And I say, "Who?" And they say, "Joe, you know." And I say goodbye. Anyway, we live in a world where technology is both our assistant and a challenge.
One of the things I want to point out is to avoid using yes, especially when you answer the phone. Because one of the old scams that was actually used by the telephone companies, Verizon and a couple of others, they would get you to sign up for something and they'd call you. And if you just say yes when you answer the phone, it would be accepted. So I tried to avoid using yes when I get any calls on, I'm not sure what that is.
Very wise counsel, Jerry.
Especially, I always answer hello, not yes.
I have had people ask, "Are you?" and they give my name, and I simply skip to who's calling.
Mm-hmm.
And I especially if I hear the two tones, which are so typical of a call center, and then a delayed click. By the way, there are 3 universal tones, which if you record them just right and use them as your voice message, it tells these robocallers, at least many of them, that your number is not in service.
I answer junk calls with a line that probably is too obscure for anybody not in this group. Is this the party to whom I am speaking?
Obscure, but remembered.
I figured this crowd would get it.
Indeed, I do.
Mm-hmm.
I used to love that show.
Wasn't Ruth Buzzy?
Lily Tomlin. Lily
Lily
Tomlin was
Lily.
the operator.
That's right.
The same one who did Edith Ann.
And Miss Frizzle on Magic School Bus.
We are speaking, of course, of the particular show
Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In,
Rowan
and Lily
Rowan
Tomlin.
and Martin's Laughing.
And Lily Tomlin is a very famous comedian.
That's to fill in those who are watching this who are not as old as some of us are. Okay. We're doing well here. We're getting to the artificial intelligence area, talking about the voicemails that are not necessarily real. I read a very interesting piece here, and I think it will fit with some of your thoughts. When students come up with an answer that makes sense to a teacher, it sets off an alarm in the teacher's head. So in this particular case, a student came in with a fact that Greek is a combination of 4 other languages, leaving the teacher baffled. Turns out that the student got that information by asking about Greek using ChatGPT. Teachers typically expect students to go to sources to get their information. But it turns out that ChatGPT and much of the large language model system can produce inaccuracies in their authoritative answers. How do you convince a student that is doing what you ask them by going and doing a search for information, instead of getting human produced errors, it's getting an artificial intelligence produced error? And in this case, the student argued that he did the right thing, and it must be that the teacher, in this case, the one questioning the answer, had made a mistake. After all, I got it from a source, and you asked me to get it from a source. I did the right thing. And the teacher thought about it for a while and said, oh yeah, I can understand how you are confused by this, but how do I now deal with telling you that your sources aren't good? ChatGPT. And as a representative of these large language models, not the only one. Now, later in this list, there's an article from Wired magazine talking about how AIS has made such huge progress, we shouldn't be afraid of it. I haven't read this article yet because the link that I have here has been pointed out as a paywall link, and I'm not a Wired subscriber, so I'm going to have to update this link with the non-paywall link that Bob mentioned. Anyway, I'm not sure I'm ready to praise AI that much yet. Glaze
Oh, Algot?
is a, yes, Bill, Dick.
I submitted the article with a paywalled wrong URL, but that'll be fixed by tomorrow, I dare say.
Yep.
And I'm not praising AI progress. We've got a bunch of friends who are in the second wave of AI development, and they praise it even less than I do. It can do so many wrong things so much faster to so many more people at once. And the better it gets, the more trouble it can create. So I thought it was a fascinating article.
I don't know where we're headed with it. I'm sure that some things are financially a good thing for a company. I read just recently that a set of 5 ChatGPT answers requires a 1-liter bottle of water that takes potable water out of a freshwater source and reduces it to undrinkable water at the other end of the data center cooling lines.
Well, that makes good sense to me. It's a whole new form of pollution.
Yeah.
But the capabilities are so immense. and particularly when misapplied.
Yeah,
I think it's
I
amazing. By the way, way back in that second wave of AI research, uh, the standing joke was they wired all these vacuum tubes together, vacuum tube computers together, and put them all together and said, "What can we ask? It's a good enough question." Finally, he said, "Is there a God?" And there was a lot of worrying and crunching, and pretty soon the teletype typed out, "There is now." That's a good warning.
yeah, I just a little perspective. These AI laptops have processors that are running 45 to upwards of trillion operations per second. Trillion.
Mm.
That generates heat and it uses power. I'll bet the power supplies are big on these.
I wonder if, as a laptop, it even can have a portability, with a battery that lasts more than a few hours.
I haven't heard anything about battery life. I'll let you know if I do.
Thank you.
They're developing better batteries so they can ride faster.
The battery for one of those AI laptops could be pretty heavy.
That sounds reasonable to me. Much as I don't want that laptop yet. I'm doing well with an old one. Okay, Glaze is a tool for artists to be able to display their work online while they hope to reduce the ability of online scrapers to use that as a generative source, making more art of the style that a particular artist has developed. University of Chicago is where Glaze has been developed and is offered free of charge to artists, but they're facing delays in access because there are so many artists wanting to prevent their work from being scraped and analyzed and reproduced. We talked about that kind of reproduction last week with William Morris. Last month, William Morris never made regular art, and yet there are art being presented by the unscrupulous to get people to buy art that never was made, but is being sold as this is William Morris art. Of course, he's a famous name, so there you go. And here's a commentary on Copilot, which is a brief comment. Consent. GitHub Copilot is the largest single largest attack on open source and the biggest of copyright and license infringement in history. Copilot is designed to remove any and all license restrictions from open source code so it can be reused by anybody, including proprietary developers, without having to respect any licensing terms. If it were okay, Microsoft would probably train its product on proprietary code from Microsoft. Right? No, they wouldn't do that. Otherwise, I'm sure AI is okay. All right. Here we have the last of our routine articles. Microsoft has pinky sworn this time they'll make security a priority. Don't worry, we've made mistakes in the past, but we'll be good. We'll do it this time. And Dick Miller, you had that on your list as well, so you got a comment?
Wait a moment. Oh, good, I'm on.
Yep.
Yes, I think maybe around noontime today, I sent you a thread which I think had 3 items in it, and it's the perfect fit for that one. Just how bad things can get. Well, people keep pushing them. There's bound to be a profit in it, so let's go deep. Microsoft has invested, I believe the number was $10 billion in a couple of projects like that. And they're in there. You can add them to that list. They're equally unbelievable to me.
Thank you. Okay. Not to burden Dennis Payne, but merely to ask, Dennis, do you have anything to tell us about a game of the month this month?
No, I still haven't gotten around to doing any of those. Sorry.
That's okay. It's always a thing we'll look forward to when we get the chance to have it. Okay, we got some questions and answers ahead of time before the meeting actually occurs. We get some, and here are 2 that were presented to us. Who uses which bootable USB formatter? Let me state that a slightly different way. A USB stick can be used to put a Linux distribution or more than one onto a computer in a temporary way that lets you evaluate what you're looking at without installing and making a permanent Linux distribution change to your computer. A lot of us have used these bootable, meaning you can stick the USB stick into the slot on the side of a computer, start the computer up, and look at a live but not installed version of a desktop environment or a Linux distribution and enjoy the experience without commitment. And Dick asks, which of the 3 listed here is the one you use? Ventoy, Etcher, or Rufus? Go ahead, Dick.
Well, personally, I've been very happy with Ventoy, and so much so that although I've loaded the others and looked at them, I haven't found any reason to move. I may be missing a few points.
May I ask why you did not include NetBootin, which used to be your favorite, on this list?
Ventoy seems more generic to me. I can put it, I think, in fewer steps. I can, for instance, take an inexpensive thumb drive and I can put half of it into Ventoy and half not. And the Ventoy half can access the other half for data. Things like that, very flexible. And I just found that once I started using it, it was fast, it was easy. it presented itself well, so you didn't have to guess what to do next.
Can I add something?
Please.
In a UNet boot, you could only have one partition, and I think, is that true? I don't quite remember.
I'm guessing that, but I'm
But
not
anyway, you could
sure.
only have one thing that booted up. Ventoy provides a front end so that you can have a bunch of ISO files on the flash drive, and it will give you a menu of all of them, and you then pick whichever one you want to boot from, and it does it directly from the ISO file without having it having to have laid in the ISO file is the only thing on the drive.
And the neatest thing,
It's very easy to set up.
yes, the neatest thing is after you've set it up, you can drag and drop new ISOs onto the folder and delete ones that you'd put there, and it works just fine. It uses whatever's there. So it's like the DVD toaster that we had at some of the install fests that had PXE boot. And you could boot off the Ethernet, and it would give you a choice of whichever 4 CD DVDs were in its 4 drawers for booting, except it's on a thumb drive as opposed to an Ethernet appliance.
Yeah. I'd like to make a little bit of a correction to Alagot's explanation. Jill's was very good, but with Ventoy, essentially that's roughly equivalent to, a bootable USB stick where you can both install or just run the local version. So you have
That's
your same
correct.
choice.
Thank you.
So I think Ventoy, when Dick mentioned it, Ventoy I thought was very good, although I tried it with one distribution on my laptop and it wouldn't boot. So I never researched that.
Bob, you had your hand up.
Indeed, I did. What I have is Windows 11 on 2 computers. Windows 11 has TPM security, and there's a limited list of TPM security keys that can be maintained at any one time. So I have to limit how many bootable USB drives I have. And pretty soon Microsoft is going to mess around with certificates for secure boot, and that's going to cause further issues. Ventoy overcomes the TPM issue. It overcomes the coming secure boot issue. It injects what needs to be injected as a one-time operation. And then you can have multiple ISOs, as has been mentioned, and you can swap and trade, drag and drop. And I like having a lot of different utilities available, all without swapping out flash drives and wearing out my USB ports. So with today's larger and larger USB drives, it to me only makes sense to be putting more than one ISO on each. Maybe Etcher and Rufus will catch up one day, but Ventoy is just so many miles ahead of everybody else. And it is so simple to run the installer and the updater. You have to be very careful to target the correct USB device, but otherwise an update does very well. You can convert from MBR to GPT, but then you have to reload all your ISOs. But it's very flexible. It can run in different kinds of systems, and it can run under different security environments. And that's going to become more and more important.
Totally agree with Bob.
Okay. And question about smart TVs. that Dick asks, are there alternatives to smart search from things like Alexa and Siri without granting permission to one's private data to the likes of Amazon, Apple, Google, and anyone else that has one of those?
The reason we're asking this question is we got a new TV, and supposedly you can say to the TV, Alexa, turn on, switch to the cable box and turn on PBS high definition or something like that. But in order to enable Alexa on there, you have to sign up for her scraping all your data. You can turn off her listening to your voice on the remote, which at least is one step in the right direction. So, if your guests in your guest room are having hot and heavy sex and the TV's in the guest room, she's not recording that all.
So we're told.
Right. But
Put my hand in front of the camera.
yeah,
Well, we have sliders on all our laptops now.
but not the TV.
Right.
I don't know what the TV can look at. I certainly can listen to you.
But I'm wondering if there is an alternative. These places are making most of their money from remarketing the data. And one or two of the articles in that threesome that I sent you late, Algot, is about that. So these are all hooking together. They're all worrying about the same things.
Oh dear.
Anyway, Bob and I both really like Ventoy, and I haven't heard any good argument to pry us loose yet. And I guess that's what I was asking. So thanks. Shall I go on to
Okay,
the next
Bob?
one?
I had
Oh,
one thing to
I
say.
thought- Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I had one thing to say about the smart TVs. I live in an apartment, and all my neighbors can hear anything that happens in here. So I don't talk to my devices. I turn off all these voice things completely. Jill raises an interesting question about the TVs. Can they watch back at you? Some of them do. And if you want to prevent that, the only way to do it is to shroud the TV, which kind of prevents you from watching it. Or watch it on your computer and shroud the TV. My Comcast system will go over to my computer monitor if I want. And I guess Ed wants to say something.
Well, we can put our are we on?
Yes.
We can put our monitor from our laptops onto the TV, which is kind of nice.
Well, I'd like to talk about that next, if that's okay. But
Yeah,
other comments on this?
yeah.
We had one from Ed.
Yeah, as far as the TV the TV looking at you, shouldn't something like that be in the TV settings to turn off that feature?
You would hope so, but the instruction, the quote manual has, how to plug it in and what to do if all you get is snow or something like that. It doesn't.
And in the fine print, it does say that if they lie to you, you said it doesn't matter.
Right.
Pretty much. That's basically what the legal wording is doing.
There should be settings that you can get to. On mine, on the controller, I press home. And then if you scroll all the way to the left, there's the settings. I don't know what brand is yours.
Yeah, and some of the setting wording on is obscure, abstruse, obfuscating.
Well,
Objectionable.
you have to learn Korean.
Shall
Okay,
I
go ahead.
proceed to the other half of the TV?
Yep.
Okay. First of all, this is what a little screen looks like. This is what a big screen looks like.
Dick, what are they looking at? I don't have my video on.
Oh, damn. Never mind. You know what? A 50-inch diagonal 4K TV, and I'll add the word smart, crossing my fingers when I say it. AI in trouble, unless you have a very clear picture of what's inside. But they're now available for $190. I look at the one that's across the room from us here, and it can be a wonderful, big, very sharp video monitor, or it can be 4 big and very sharp computer monitors at once, or it can be 16 of them if you put them down to about the size of a small laptop. This is dynamite for using with a computer. It's dynamite for using without a computer.
For gaming.
And if you're
into it.
gaming, and it's got a lot of stuff built in. My big question is, can I ask something the questions that isn't going to remarket my data not only as 0.1% of the answer, but also with specific information as to where I go at what time each day in a typical week. One of my articles that Algot will be putting in later is just about that. So that's the puzzle. But if you just don't attach it to anything except your computer, period, for local use, it works fine. They are beautiful, and the price is so much less than it was a little while ago. If anyone's near us and wants a sample, drop in, call first. I'm still very impressed with how much we got for the money. And I want to tell you about one more. If you don't have $190, for $10, I think my new smartwatch is incredibly good looking, effective, and affordable. $10. That includes shipping. If you want, you can buy 2 of them at $9 each, or 4 of them at $8 each. I'm pretty sure that if I buy 100, they'll just ship them for free, no charges at all. I haven't quite worked out how it works, but we did the 2 and we're very happy with them.
You can grow more wrists.
Again, I'll make sure Algot has a place you can click and read about that. I was surprised with how good it is. And yes, it does do regular measuring of things such as blood dissolved oxygen, and draw your doctor a week-long chart of how it's been working. Things like that. This could be a lifesaver. $9, holy moly. So those are my bargains for the week. We're not selling them, we bought them, but we're glad we did and sharing the news.
Okay, before
If
we
you're getting
wrap,
100, if you're getting 100 for nothing, we'll pool in with you.
thank you. Before we wrap for this week, we're close to 5 o'clock, which is our normal ending time for a meeting. I'd like to remind everybody of something that Jerry Feldman mentioned. There's a BLU monthly meeting happening next Wednesday, And if you go to the blu.org site, you can find out more about the details of the meeting with the founder of the NatickFOSS website or service, whatever that actually is. We are not the only FOSS group in the world, but we are the one that's here in Metro West Boston. And we look forward to our monthly meetings when we get the chance to share a good discussion of what we've seen during the week. If you are interested in being more active, there is a discuss mailing list that you can sign up to be on, and gives you the chance to give us feedback and to submit topics that you would like discussed during a meeting. Go to our website, NatickFOSS.org. The index page has all the information that you need to sign up for that discuss mailing list. And if you are listening without being a regular participant here, you might also ask to get on the announce mailing list so that you know ahead of time when our next meeting is going to be. A little preview of the earliest version of our agenda is something that gets sent out sometime during the month ahead. And we look forward to getting to know more about free and open source software every month, and look forward to meeting more and more users and people interested in the topic. Anybody have last minute comments before we say goodbye until August 1st? We're
Yes.
early in next month.
Yes, may the FOSS be with you.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you all for listening and bearing up through our standard glitches as we go through this meeting. And maybe we'll eventually figure out how to do it perfectly. But wouldn't that be strange to be perfect? Bye till August.
Very well.
Okay, bye, everyone.
See you next month.
All done if anybody cares. Yep.